Story 1.
Am I the asshole for ending my relationship after my girlfriend said no to marriage? I, character 41M, have been dating my ex, GF 39F, for nearly 6 years. Our relationship was a good one. 4 years ago, I informed her family and friends I was going to propose to her while we were on a family vacation and received their blessing and well wishes. The night I proposed, I tried to make the night as memorable and perfect as possible. I asked her after a nice dinner surrounded by the family, and she said, "No, not yet anyways." I was quite hurt, honestly, and went back to our room to think things out and not overreact. A few hours later, she came to the room and asked me what was wrong and why I left the group. We had a fairly long conversation as to my feelings and her reason to deny my proposal. Turns out she didn't think I was ready for the commitment just yet, so I took her thoughts to heart and informed her I understand her reasoning. However, I was raised in a way where you take a no for a no, not a maybe next time. She asked me to just wait a bit longer until we were in a stable place, and I agreed. 8 to 10 months later, she started dropping hints that she was ready to be married. I can't wait for our wedding. Our wedding is going to be spectacular. I am so looking forward to my dad walking me down the aisle, etc. A little over a year since my first proposal, I decided to propose again, this time just us together after a wonderful date night. When I opened the ring box, she got really quiet and once again said, "No, not yet, maybe a little more down the line." After this second refusal, I fell out of love with her. It sounds cold, but it was the truth. When we got back home, I slept in our guest bedroom and spent the rest of the night thinking of our relationship. The next morning, she asked why I didn't sleep with her in our bedroom, and I told her the truth and informed her that I think we need to end the relationship. I informed her that I take marriage very seriously and I do not want to be lead on, and this time, this no was the final no on the subject. I gave her a month to find a new place to live, and since then I have been receiving texts and emails from her friends and family informing me I am a heartless bastard and trying to get me to give her more time and not be a callous asshole. My friends have my back on this and understand why I ended the relationship. AITAH?
I think he is not an asshole. What do you guys think? Comment below.
Story 2.
Am I the asshole for leaving my husband at the hospital after he refused to be in the delivery room with me? This happened 2 months ago, but it's still causing major friction in my family, so I need some outside opinions. I, 29F, and my husband Jake, 32M, have been together for 6 years, married for 3. We were both ecstatic when we found out we were expecting our first child. Pregnancy was tough for me, though. I had severe morning sickness, gestational diabetes, and was generally miserable. But Jake was supportive and sweet the whole way through, which made it bearable. As we got closer to my due date, we discussed birth plans. I was adamant that I wanted Jake in the delivery room. I needed his support, and he'd always agreed. However, a few weeks before my due date, Jake started acting strange. He was distant, distracted, and wouldn't engage in any baby-related discussions. I thought he was just anxious about becoming a dad, so I didn't press him too much. The day I went into labor, Jake drove me to the hospital but seemed off. He was quiet and kept checking his phone. When we got there, he pulled the nurse aside and spoke to her privately. She came back and told me Jake wouldn't be in the delivery room because he was uncomfortable with blood and medical procedures. I was stunned. He'd never mentioned this before. I begged him to stay, told him I needed him, but he just kept saying, "I can't do this." I was heartbroken and furious, but I didn't have much time to dwell on it as my contractions were getting stronger. Jake said he'd be in the waiting room and kissed me on the forehead before leaving. I was left alone, crying and feeling utterly abandoned. Labor was long, painful, and traumatic. I was alone the entire time except for the medical staff. When our son was finally born, I was exhausted, emotionally and physically. The nurse handed me my son, and all I felt was a deep sadness that Jake wasn't there to share this moment. After I was taken to a recovery room, I asked the nurse to get Jake. She came back and said he'd left the hospital hours ago. I couldn't believe it. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Finally, I sent him a text saying I was done and he could find his own way home. I didn't see him until the next day. He showed up at the hospital with flowers and an apology, saying he'd panicked and needed some air. He claimed he'd gone home to shower and change and fell asleep, which I didn't buy for a second. I told him I didn't believe him. I was overwhelmed with anger and hurt, and I told him he had let me down in the worst possible way. He kept apologizing, saying he knew he'd messed up and he'd do anything to make it right. I didn't want him near me or our son at that moment, so I asked him to leave. He tried to protest, but I told him I needed time to process everything. He left, and I spent the rest of my hospital stay alone with my baby, trying to grapple with the enormity of what had happened. Since then, Jake has been trying to make amends. He's been taking parenting classes, attending therapy, and is constantly trying to be present and supportive. But I can't shake the feeling of betrayal. He abandoned me at one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. Every time I look at him, I remember being alone in that delivery room, terrified and in pain, wondering why the person who promised to be by my side wasn't there. My family is split. Some think I'm being too hard on Jake, that he made a mistake and is clearly remorseful. They say he's a good father and partner otherwise, and I should focus on moving forward for the sake of our child. Others think what he did was unforgivable and I should leave him. They believe I'll never truly trust him again, and that's no foundation for a marriage. I'm torn. I do still love him, and I know he loves me and our son, but part of me wonders if I'll ever get over this. Was it just a moment of weakness on his part, or a sign of something deeper that I can't overlook? So, AITAH for leaving him at the hospital and now considering leaving him for good?
I think she is not an asshole. What do you people think? Comment below. Story 3.
Am I the asshole for not telling my roommate about my large salary when I'm aware he's been struggling to pay rent? I, 28F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. It's small and we step on each other's toes sometimes, but it works for us because we were all in graduate programs when we met and needed something cheap. For the last 6 years, we've all split rent evenly, and I've been fine with that. Even when they all got jobs and I was still a resident, I didn't once ask to adjust the rent. Now, to be honest, I'm a very quiet and non-confrontational person, and residency kept me on weird hours, so I didn't speak to them a lot, and they didn't even realize that I'd finished my program when I did. I also live on the second floor of our apartment in a space off the attic storage that was meant to be an office, so I keep to myself and go about my business. Once I became a licensed emergency physician, I was able to find a job in our city relatively quickly and started working about 4 months out of residency. I'd already worked as an EMT for years around this hospital, even in college when I was getting clinical hours for med school. So I knew the ED well, and it wasn't hard for me to get a job there. I still had loans from med school to pay off, so I saw no problem with hanging around and paying my same share of the rent, utilities, and groceries that I'd paid for 6 years until I built up savings. Even though I was making more than my other 3 roommates combined. I'm not in a relationship, don't want kids now, and I liked my little living arrangements while I got some savings behind me. I was fine until crap hit the fan yesterday, and by some insane stroke of bad luck, one of my roommates, A, 27M, was in a car crash and was transported to the hospital by ambulance when I was on shift. He was fine, just a bit of whiplash and a stitched-up cut from broken glass, but while he was in the ED, he saw me and realized I wasn't a resident anymore. Even though he couldn't pin down my exact salary, a quick Google search could tell him that in our city, I was making at least double what my roommates were. He was pissed, and he told my other 2 roommates while I was still at work, so when I came home, they were all waiting for me. He confronted me and asked me what I was making, and I told them the truth. They all lost their minds at me because I knew that A had been struggling to make his share of the rent every month, whereas I was hoarding my money. I listened to what they had to say, but said that I still had loans to pay off, and I was going to bed. I was tired after a long shift, and I'm aware that I was probably really blunt and cold, because when I'm getting yelled at, part of my job description is just to take it with a calm face. This morning, they've all been giving me the cold shoulder, and though they haven't talked about it yet, I can feel it coming. I don't know how to address this because I really liked our living arrangements and don't want it to change, but I can't help feeling like I'm the AH for not helping A out more. So, AITAH?
I think she is not an asshole. What do you people think? Comment below.
Story 4.
Am I the asshole for agreeing to an open relationship then sleeping with someone else? My girlfriend 4F and I 23M have been going through a very rough time lately, and it all boiled over in the past few days. We have been together for 3 years. Things were going well for the most part, we got along and would rarely fight. Even when we did, we would often both cool down and talk it out not long after. However, about 2 weeks ago, my girlfriend approached me and asked if I wanted to open our relationship. I was immediately shocked and I almost thought she was joking at first. She said that she really loves me and wants to be with me, but before we get more serious, she wants to get more experience. She was my first everything, and she has been with 2 other guys. I shot down the idea and told her I wasn't comfortable with it. She kept badgering me about it, but eventually relented when she realized I wasn't budging, and that seemed like the end of it. However, a few days later she came to me again and asked me more aggressively about it, and was insinuating that we might have to take a break if we can't just try opening our relationship for a few months, considering it was basically, we take a break or, I just give her this. I relented and said we could open up the relationship. 2 days later, last Friday, I got home from work and saw she was dressed up, and I asked what for. She said that she was going out to the bar with her friends and she wouldn't be back until tomorrow. I immediately recognized what this meant and asked if she would rather spend the night in with me, but she said she really wanted to do this. Eventually she left, and I was left sitting alone watching TV getting drunk. I got sad, so I called one of my close friends, 23 FWA, and was telling her about the situation. After we talked for a while, I asked her if she wanted to come over and drink because I was feeling like shit being alone. After she got there and we hung out for a bit drinking and discussing the open relationship and how upset I was, my friend suggested that if my girlfriend was essentially cheating on me, I might as well enjoy the perks of an open relationship too. I'm sure you could see what happened there, and I won't get into details, but it made me feel a lot better. Flash forward to the next morning, and I wake up to my girlfriend freaking out asking me what the hell my friend and I were doing in our bed. I told her what happened and she got mad. She told me that she didn't even do anything last night and ended up crashing at her friend's house. She now wants to close our relationship back off and make me prove my loyalty for cheating on her. We never discussed any rules or anything like that, so I really don't see how I did anything wrong. So am I the asshole for participating in the open relationship that my girlfriend suggested?
I think he is not an asshole. What do you people think? Comment below. Story 5.
Am I the asshole for telling my GF I won't move in with her because her rent demands are unreasonable? My GF and I have been together for a while. While I make good money, my GF actually had a house she's making payments on. We discussed moving in together, and she doesn't feel entirely comfortable adding me to her mortgage, even though we do want to get married eventually. I said it's fine, and I get it. This is her house, and she's been dealing with it for years now. But obviously I don't want to be a kept man. I currently rent a place, and it's relatively decent for the price. Anyway, we were making calculations, and her demand on my rent for her is twice as much as what I pay for my own place. I told her that is absolutely ridiculous. She claims it's what her house would rent for in the market. Not inaccurate, but I told her that only works when the landlord isn't in the house, and that at most I'd be renting just one room. I could afford it if I don't save as much, but it'd too close for comfort. She says I'm just making excuses, and I told her I'm not going to be paying that much. She insists she really wants to live together, but she said I need to pull my own weight.
I think he is not an asshole. What do you people think? Comment below. Subscribe for more interesting stories.